Hey everybody, welcome to Outlier on Air, episode 428. This is the podcast where we talk to the founders, disruptors, and mavens of the world. As always, I'm your host, Ever Gonzalez. Thank you for being with us. Today's episode is brought to you by the Outlier Podcast Festival. Yes, I am promoting one of my own things. It's a podcasting festival. We go to different cities throughout the U.S. We host 3 festivals a year. We've been to Austin, Denver, LA twice. We've been out here in Utah. And now we've announced 3 new cities in 2020. We're going to Salt Lake City in January. We're going to Columbus, Ohio in May. And we're going to North Adams, Massachusetts in September. You can find more information at Outlier Podfest. That's outlierpodfest.com. You can register today. Come and join us. We have a good time. We have a lot of great speakers, a lot of great workshops. If you're an indie podcaster, podcasting giant, and everything in between, you're going to find value at one of our festivals. So again, that's outlierpodfest.com. Anyway, on today's episode, we have Byron Reese. He is an entrepreneur, author, futurist, and technologist. On this episode, we talked to Byron about AI, when he thinks the robots are going to take over the world, and if we're going to be able to live to 200, 250 years, and you should stick around for his answer. In a world full of pessimists, Byron is actually an optimist about the future. He doesn't think we're going to be losing jobs to tech and robots. He actually believes that we're going to be able to gain jobs because of the tech and the robots and everything that's coming down the pipeline. He also thinks that we might be able to stop wars and solve world hunger with tech. It's a fascinating discussion with him. I invite you to join us. So without further ado, here's Byron.
Time, weather, and always pass. Case of the various
Byron, welcome to the show.
Couldn't be happier to be here.
Yeah, we're really excited. We kind of like to collect these entrepreneurs, these outliers, these mavericks, these free thinkers onto our show. We have 400 plus episodes, right? We've had a lot of great guests. You are certainly somebody that we're very, very excited about. Author, serial entrepreneur, all around great guy. I mean, this is going to be a great discussion. So again, thank you for being on.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
So your book, Fourth Age, Smart Robots, Conscious Computers, and the Future of Humanity. Let's talk about that for a sec. How'd that come about?
You know, I noticed something in this debate about jobs. Everybody knows the question, what's going to happen with employment in the future? And what's going to happen with AI? And what I found really intriguing about the question is that you had really smart people, really informed people on both sides of the issue believing completely different things. You know, you had Elon Musk saying AI is an existential threat, and then you have Mark Zuckerberg saying, that's ridiculous. And I really wanted to kind of understand where that huge variety in opinions came from. And what I learned was it isn't that these various people know different things. They don't have some kind of privileged knowledge. It's that they have different fundamental beliefs relating to what are people, and are we machines, and questions like that all of these other things kind of flow from. And so that's why I got into it. And I wrote a book that isn't really about what I think. I didn't want to just be like another guy with an opinion. It's because it doesn't actually really say what I think. I mean, I'm happy to talk about that, but really what I wanted to do was write a book that could help a reader take a value system they already have and apply it to these questions. Because I think sometimes people think, if Elon Musk and Bill Gates and Zuckerberg and all these people can't agree on what's going to happen with AI, like, how could I possibly know? I'm not an AI person. And I wanted to kind of debunk that and say, no, if you have a value system, it's pretty straightforward where that's going to lead us. But, if you have a belief set, it's pretty straightforward what that implies. And that's what I wanted to write about.
With all these names that you mentioned, I don't know, is it just me or is it the majority of them though? I mean, I know there are people on both sides, but it feels like the majority of the voices out there are kind of down on or negative on or scared of AI and what the future holds in that aspect. Is that the majority, or is that just because that's what kind of sells newspapers and people are excited?
Well, there's two big separate questions. One is the question of general intelligence. Are we going to build an AI like you see in the movies that may one day take over? That's a question. And then there's a much more practical question, which is, are the technologies that we already know how to do, are they going to wipe out all the jobs? And I would say on that first question about general intelligence, I have a podcast about AI and I bring practitioners on, and there are incredibly few people who are worried about it because they almost all think it's that general intelligence, that creative, you know, commander data sort of robot. Um, Nobody knows how to build that. And I think most of the practitioners that I've talked to don't think we're going to build it in any time horizon that needs to keep people up right now. The other question about jobs, I would say, I find my people to be split 50-50, more or less. And I personally don't think it's possible for these technologies to destroy jobs. I don't think there's a finite number of jobs out there and that robots are steadily chipping away at them. There's actually an infinite number of jobs out there because they can be created the minute anybody takes something like, a lump of clay and adds labor and technology to it and makes something worth more, like a vase. And because technology increases human productivity, technology always increases wages. It's kind of like the internet. It's 25 years old, the consumer internet. And if I had gone back in time and I said to you, ever, in 25 years, this thing's going to have billions of users, and here's what it can do. What's going to happen to jobs? You might have said, well, oh, wow, that's really going to be rough for the travel agents and the
Absolutely.
stockbrokers and the newspapers and all of that. And you would have been right about everything, but you would not have been able to see Uber, Etsy, Airbnb, Google, Amazon, eBay, a million new companies that were created, millions and millions of jobs that nobody could have imagined before. So you can always see exactly what's going to be destroyed, and none of us have the imagination to have a clue what's going to be created. And and so if you just remember this one little fact, which is technology increases human productivity. Human productivity is why wages rise. Then it's good for humans. I mean, I'll just say one last quick thing on that. Um, I don't work harder than my great grandparents worked, but I live a much more lavish life than they ever could have imagined living.
And
And
that's because of technology?
it's because an hour of my labor yields so much more than an hour of their labor. I don't have to haul water up from a well anymore. I just turn on a tap. And so you just keep drawing that line. But again, it's the good people disagree on this question. And I would say, yeah, good people disagree on it. And so I don't ever, feel like I need to defend my view. Particularly, we're all going to find out.
That's
But
right. One way or another.
that's right. But personally would say that what we're experiencing is that phenomenon where we can see what will be destroyed, not what will be created. And if we just keep the faith that these technologies increase productivity, I mean, if you don't think increasing productivity is good, then you should require everybody to work with one arm tied behind their back. Because what would happen? Productivity would decline, and you would create a lot of new jobs because now you need two people to do everything that used to only need one. But productivity goes way down. That means wages go way down. That means standard of living fall. So if tying one arm behind your back is bad, then by extension, adding a third arm would be great. And that's kind of what technology does.
Yeah, in the beginning, right when we started to focus on this, when I started to obviously hear the chatter and trying to figure out for myself what the future was going to look like, whether the machines were going to take all of our jobs. but I either listened to one of your episodes, or you were being interviewed somewhere, and you explained it perfectly. I mean, just kind of like what you did now. It feels like we're all going to rise to that next level, right? The truck driver who is displaced because of trucks that are driving themselves is not necessarily going to be, you know, a physicist or anything like that, but they are going to move up to the next level, and those guys are going to move up to the next level, and so on and so forth. And so I think everybody is lifted up, if I understood you correctly.
That is exactly right. And that's what I think a lot of people kind of have a little trouble grasping, which is they say this, which sounds like very fine reasoning. They say, look, technology creates great new jobs, like a geneticist, and it destroys entry level jobs, like an order taker at a fast food place. And then they say, so what's that order taker going to do? Become a geneticist? And like you just said, no, that's not what happens. What happens is a college professor becomes a geneticist, a high school teacher gets the college job, a substitute teacher gets hired on at the high school, all the way down the line. The question we have to ask is, can everybody do a job just a little bit harder than the job they currently have? And I think the answer to that is yes. I think people by and large are underutilized. And if that's the case, then that's 200 years of economic history of this country, which is technology makes great new jobs, destroys really bad jobs. It used to be every hole had to be dug with a guy with a shovel. Now it doesn't because of technology. Um, and all the way down, it creates great new jobs, and everybody shifts up a notch. I
I
mean, look,
like
the
that.
people on the other side would argue with me. And again, my book never really talks about what I think. And so I always feel a duty to represent the other side. The other side of that question says, look, if the changes come fast enough, that kind of normalization won't have time to happen. And you'll have economic disruption because of that, if all of that just happens too quickly. So they kind of say, yeah, in the long term, great, but what happens if it's too quickly? And then the other thing that they would tend to say is, well, the technologies we're developing now are just wiping out huge new kinds of jobs that we thought in the past were quote safe. I don't find either of those compelling. Um, and the first one, that it's going to happen too quickly. It does feel like we're in this time of great change, and I wouldn't minimize that. But I would say that by my calculation, the half life of a job is about 50 years. So about every 50 years, half of all jobs vanish. And if you think back 50 years, you probably, and then 50 years before that, um, and we never have unemployment. We never have systemic unemployment in this country, and it's because of this phenomenon. I don't have a sense that jobs are vanishing faster than half every 50 years, even now. But anyway,
But so we talk about the Industrial Revolution and how that changed everything, and many people thought that was going to disrupt, when actually I think that was one of our greatest growing moments in history. But would you agree that now, with technology, with everything that's going on now, it feels like it's accelerated? Like we're I don't know what the numbers are, doubling though, or whatever, more often than we have in any period in the history of the world.
absolutely, absolutely. And so one way to look at that is that means job loss is going to be faster. But
Mhm.
another way to look at it, which is the way I would tend to see it, is that it means human productivity is going to increase that much faster. A person with a smartphone that has an AI on it that can, diagnose illness or give legal advice or anything, that person is more empowered than they've ever been. Like, they just gained a superpower. In fact, 1,000 superpowers, and those superpowers will enable them to do amazing new things all the faster.
I'm trying to figure out if, because you're very optimistic about this, right? Talking to you and listening to your show and some of your talks, TEDx, and all those things, you're very optimistic about the future when a lot of people aren't, like we discussed earlier. Now, is this optimistic type of view because that's just who you are across the board, or because of the data and the research that you've done?
That's a very fair question. mean, I would obviously answer is the latter, but I could just simply be deluding myself. I can tell you, I came about it because I read, like, I can put it down to a minute. That I read this quote by Gene Roddenberry, the man who created Star Trek, and he said, "In the future, there will be no hunger and there will be no greed, and all the children will know how to read." And that's what Star Trek was about. It was about this great new future. And I got really curious if that was really going to happen or not. And 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 I, at that point, I didn't have an opinion on it. I wasn't an optimist or pessimist about the future.
How long ago was
And
that?
that would be 2007,
Okay.
2008. And I set out to figure out what I thought about that. And I wrote a book called Infinite Progress. I guess that kind of tips my hand what I decided. But I tried to figure out what is it that technology actually does for us. Because if you said, let's pick one thing we know technology is going to expand. And so I tried to look at what's going to happen with technology, and what, how will that ripple through society. I will say this, though. I would say that pessimism, as a general rule of thumb, is a cognitive bias we have. And so cognitive biases are these things where our brain doesn't necessarily work rationally. It may work beneficially, don't get me wrong, but it may not actually map to the facts. And I think we are a really skittish species. And I've heard somebody say once that a long time ago, it was much better for us to mistake a rock for a bear and run away from it than to mistake a bear for a rock. It's just a rock, and stay put. And so we developed skittishness and nervousness um, a long time ago, and it's deep in us. So we tend to look at things that could be a rock or a bear. We tend to say, it's a bear, run, run. And it served us well in the past, but that doesn't mean that it's true. And so I think people's kind of deep down inside, they're nervous about the unknown.
For sure.
And so that manifests as pessimism, because you think, what could possibly go wrong? And you just start saying, climate change, pandemics, engineered diseases, a lack of water, uh, blight. I mean, you can just come up with all of these things. But there was a time in our history where humans were, about 75,000 years ago, where humans were down to something like 1,000 mating pairs. We were an endangered species. We were hanging by a thread. And, smart money wouldn't have placed a bet on our survival. And yet here we are. And in the process, we managed to invent human rights, and we've managed to raise the standard of living and create leisure and democracy and great works of art and all of the rest. And so I'm very bullish on us. I believe in us, that the arc of history, the arc of history flows favorably for us.
I love end of world type of movies and books, and those type of reading that I like to do, just because it excites me, it scares me, right? I'm very interested in it. But I think, looking back in the history of the world right now, we are living in the, I'm not just saying best because of where we are and who we are, but less wars, right? Less hunger, all those things, less disease. And I think, and I mean, you can jump in here, a lot of it has to do with technology, the way we communicate, the what's in front of us, right? We can, for the most part, do a lot of different things with the things that have come out in the last 25, 30 years. But yet I'm still very sometimes down on the future and what all this is going to look like in 50 years, 80 years, 100 years.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, look, I like to see Will Smith battle a robot just like the next guy.
Uh-huh,
It's,
uh-huh.
Will Smith sitting around in his apartment watching TV in the future doesn't get my $8.
Yeah.
So I get the appeal of those. But what happens is, eventually you see enough of those movies that people do something. We all do something called reasoning from fictional evidence. We see that enough, and And we're like, yeah, that could happen. I've seen that before. That could happen. I keep seeing this over and that could happen. That could totally happen. And so what is otherwise, good drama and exciting and all of that becomes something we therefore believe has some kind of scientific merit. And when in fact it doesn't, because the technologies that are in those movies, like, the robot becomes, like Westworld or something, the robot becomes emergently conscious, either cannot happen, which is a minority viewpoint, or will not happen for a long, long time, which is the overwhelming majority viewpoint. There's only a very few people who think that that's going to happen soon. Elon Musk being one of them, um, but very few people. And by the way, interestingly, very few people are working on building a general intelligence. I try to keep account of it, and 99.9% of the money that comes into AI is trying to make a better spam filter, or route you through traffic better, narrow AI. And nobody thinks your spam filter is going to take over. The amount of money that's being put into general intelligence, there's probably a dozen groups working on that in the world, maybe.
Oh, really? Let's talk about that. For some reason, right? And again, we don't know. I just, this feeling, these things that we read, I would have put that number a lot higher. You're saying it's not as high as we thought.
No, I think Google's working on it, and the OpenAI initiative they're really thinking a lot about it. Carnegie Mellon has people thinking about it. Yeah, there aren't a lot. It's unclear. Look, we don't know how it is that we're intelligent. We don't have a definition of intelligence. I won't even go down that road, but we don't know how it is that we can do what we can do. And I wish it were that easy, but really we don't know how a thought is encoded in the brain. We don't know how people are creative, and we have no idea where consciousness comes from. Like, how is it that, you can feel warmth? A computer can measure temperature. There's a big difference between those two things. What would it take for a computer to experience the world, to feel warmth? We don't know. So we really have all of these capabilities that we don't have a clue how we do it. And so it's a hard problem to even start to try to answer. How is it that you could build a machine that could do this? And so there's a few approaches. One is take what we know how to do already and just do it a million times better, and eventually, ta-da, it's going to go from playing chess to painting the Mona Lisa. And then there's another view that says we need to that we need to rethink it entirely. The Paul Allen Institute, they're probably working on it. I shouldn't have left them out. Maybe at University of Toronto they're working on it, but again, it's not a when I ask people in the industry, the closer you are to coding an AI, the further off you think it is. Andrew Ng, one of the super brilliant people in AI, and just Google him. He's like one of the biggest brains in it. Says worrying about it is like worrying about overpopulation on Mars. Maybe someday overpopulation on Mars is going to be a problem, but don't worry about it.
Okay.
But I do want to say one last thing on that. It all hinges on a central core belief, and that's that people are machines. If people are machines, then someday we'll build a mechanical person, and then that person will get better and better and better and better and better. If people are not machines, then it's arguable we can ever make a general intelligence, because if you're not a machine and you're the only thing we know that has general intelligence, then it doesn't follow that we can build general intelligence.
Let's talk about this, and maybe it's not in your wheelhouse or something that you've thought about too much, but whether it's tomorrow or 100 years from now, I'm assuming that this is coming, or at least the debate and the where we really need to be concerned, or really at least take a look at it. When that happens, again, whether it's tomorrow or in the future, who's in charge? Right?
That's an open question. Yeah. Nobody knows. Yeah, nobody knows.
Congress has no clue how the internet works, let alone how any of this stuff is going to affect us. So
I mean, look,
that's what's
it's
scary, right?
really hard. You
Yeah.
know, if somebody made something that said, "I'm smart, I'm alive," you wouldn't even know whether to believe it or not. That could just be a program. You know, I can get a Furby to say, "I love you," but that doesn't mean Furby loves you. Uh, so you know, first you'd have to believe it, and then second, it would have to somehow be able to express itself. Then it would somehow have to be worrisome. Like if it if it's just running on your computer and painting paintings or something. And I mean, it's so far out. It's science fiction at this point. And like I said, if you don't think you're a machine, see, I ask people on my show, what do you think you are? Are you a machine, an animal, or a human? And 95%, literally, of 100 guests, about 95 of them say, "Oh, I'm a machine. I mean, what else would I be?" And
Well,
when I
is
put
that
that,
just because of the guests you having on there, right?
correct, but they're all people in AI.
Uh-huh.
They have a mechanistic view of the world
Uh-huh.
and the use. And then if I put that on my website, what are you? 85% of the general public answers, what would you guess?
A human.
Correct. And so there's huge disconnect between this 95% who believe they're machines and are trying to build, as it were, a mechanical intellect, and the 85% of the population that hears them and is scared by what they say, but don't necessarily uh, connect the dots that, well, that's because they don't think humans are anything but machines. So, so to the listeners out there, if you don't think you're a machine, that's not something you should worry about. If you do think you're a machine, then it's coming. It's inevitable
That's right.
because it's as inevitable as whatever the metaphor is. But it's unclear when it would be. If you ask everybody, you get a range of 5 to 500 years, which should suggest nobody knows. But if you averaged it, you get 20, 25 years out. But it's always been 20 or 25 years out, right?
For
Like in
everything.
1980,
Absolutely.
it was 20 or
Absolutely.
25
Yeah.
years out. So, but that doesn't mean it's not 20 to 25 years out this time. I
Eventually it's
don't
going to
know.
be 20, 25 years, right? No matter what.
Correct.
Now your book, The Fourth Age, I want to dig into a little bit more, but let's talk about first what the first three ages were
So
and when were they?
I somewhat arbitrarily said there have been three times that technology's come along and changed us in such a profound way that it like changed us, what we were. And I think the first is when we got language, and yeah, when we got language, or maybe you could say when we got stories. But anyway, when we got language, and then humans became we could coordinate our actions with each other, and that made us super powerful. Then we invented cities because of agriculture. We made agriculture that made us settle down, and that created cities. And the cities gave us something called the division of labor, which means you can do something and I can do something and somebody else can do something, all different, and we all are better off because of it. We're all richer because of it, and that changed us. And the third thing was when two technologies came in the world at the exact same instant, and nobody knows why. Probably a coincidence. And that's when we got writing and the wheel.
Mhm.
And those two technologies meant we had everything we needed for nations, for countries. And immediately, all over the world, these great empires emerged: Mesoamerica, Mesopotamia, the Nile, the Indus, the Po, all these, because they had these technologies. So I think AI, whatever it is, and robots are a fourth age. If we can multiply our ability to think and multiply what we can do with our bodies through robotics, uh, then that's something new and profoundly different.
So where are we in the fourth age? I'm assuming right in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I have a I talk about that in my book. It could have started 50 years ago, maybe, and it could have just now started. It doesn't matter too much. It's like the first people who spoke, like they were the only people speaking. Like the first guy was probably just talking to himself the whole time, right? Um, until he got like a second guy to get it. And so we're definitely at the beginning. Yeah.
So is there a fifth age?
Well, that's the last chapter of my book. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That would
Which
be. I I believe we live in a galaxy, in a universe that sure looks like it's inviting us to come explore it. Right? It's shockingly big, and I would love someday for 1 billion planets out there to have 1 billion humans on them each, and each, living in safety and prosperity, each able to become the best them that they can be. And of course, before we talk about other planets, we have to bring that to this planet, and we're embarrassingly lacking in it. We're so much better than we used to be, but there's still, half the world. Well, anyway, yeah, we're still woefully inadequate. There's just but technology is this trick we learned, and this trick is I've learned how to multiply what I'm able to do. I can do more now, and with technology, we can feed everybody, and with technology, we can do all of these other things, and and as that grows, we're going to eliminate hunger and eliminate disease and eliminate poverty and expand lifespans. And you don't have to have poor people, and you don't have to have hungry people, and you don't have to have sick people. They only exist because we don't have the technology to solve them, and that's what I think will happen.
So do you see the world as eventually, hopefully, right, if we get it right, we end hunger and wars, maybe?
I do believe that. Um, I don't think many of these we even have to get right. I think they're almost as inevitable. They're almost unstoppably unstoppable forces. I do want to say war. And in Infinite Progress, I gave 44 reasons why I don't think there'll be war in the future. And I think there's a lot of them that are kind of like, there's democratic peace theory that democracies don't go to war with each other, and there's more democracies than ever. There's lots like that, but in the end, war will end. I think I can find common ground with most people. War will end when war is no longer profitable, when you can't make money off of it, when nobody can make money off of it.
Interesting.
And it used to be that, yeah, Henry Ford said that. He said, "Show me who profits from a war, and I'll show you how to end war." Uh, but it used to be, you could make good bank invading another country and hauling everything off, right?
Uh-huh.
And now, I read that if Tokyo were leveled, and they were talking about an earthquake, but it's all the same, it would take $10 trillion to rebuild it. That's more than Japan's GDP. So Japan's not going to go to war with somebody that can level Tokyo. They're not going to go to war with a country that could do that. Why would they?
Mhm.
And when the whole world is like, that would be crazy. Why would we ever do that? Then I think you can hope for a world without war. It's a bold claim that, because in the last 5,000 years we've only had about 260 that haven't had war, but I think war is quickly becoming unprofitable.
Which we hope to live in your future, right? I mean, that would be amazing, and one of the things that I guess we can look forward to. Now, as we kind of start to wrap up a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about you specifically, serial entrepreneur, right? Author. You're kind of one of the leading minds when it comes to futurists and topics and discussions. Who are some of the people that you're following right now in that topic, in that theme, that excite you, whether you agree with them or not?
Oh, probably a lot of names you would know. There's Matt Ridley, who wrote The Rational Optimist, and of course I love um, Steven Pinker, who's written a number of books about the future, and he is an original thinker. Um, Malcolm Gladwell, I think, is I don't agree with everything, but of course that's great.
Mm-hmm.
So folks like that, I think, are super brilliant. Um, try to read every word they write.
It's funny. One of the things that I find most appealing about the people, the authors that I read or people that I follow, listening to their talks and things like that. You, Malcolm Gladwell, those type of individuals take somewhat complicated concepts and themes and problems, and I wouldn't say dumb it down, but you explain it in a way that um, many of us can understand, and at least start to think on our own about that topic or problem. So whatever you're doing, congratulations, and keep doing it. It's I think it's very beneficial for us to start thinking about this specific topic, right? It's moving
Well,
forward.
thank you for that. I mean, I'm not an ideologue. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I'm not.
And it
for also
shows.
trying to-
It shows, by the way, in the books and
So
everything else you're doing.
what I try to share is just kind of my own journey, and I'm work my way through this stuff kind of a step at a time, and so if it helps somebody else along, uh, you know, great, pay it forward.
Okay. As we again, as we start to wind this down, let's talk about what I don't know in an overview, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, but let's pick 100 years, right? If we were around in 100 years, and we had you back on the show, what would you and I be talking about in 100 years from now?
Well, I hope we are around, you and I, and you. I'll go ahead and put that on my planner if you like. 2119.
Let's do it.
Okay. Um, I think we would probably talk about Shakespeare. We would say, wow, it's 2119. Shakespeare wrote 500 years ago this year. Like he was writing plays in 1619. And why is it that why is Leonardo DiCaprio the sixth still starring in Shakespeare?
Uh-huh.
And I would say, that's a great question. And I think it's because we haven't changed any in those 500 years. We still know an Iago and a Lady Macbeth, and we still know well all of them. I mean, human nature doesn't change, and so as alien as like looking out your window and seeing all these different things may be, we're not going to be any different. We're still going to read Shakespeare, and I read about this archaeological dig where from a couple of thousand years ago where they found these bullets, I guess you would call them, that you put in a slingshot. They were made of metal. They were cast and they were made of metal, and you'd put them in like a real slingshot. And inscribed on each one of them was the word "catch."
Yeah.
And you chuckle because we still get the joke, even though it's been 2,500 years. It's still like, he wrote check on his bullets, catch on his bullets, catch. And so in the end, we don't actually change. We we use technology to make gentle the life of this world and to protect the weak from the strong and all these other things, and we make a better world, but we're still us in the end.
Byron, we've enjoyed having you on the show. We love talking about the future, what it holds, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly of it. Obviously, you are the real deal. You're leading the charge when it comes to this type of thinking. For those that are interested, that want to get to know you a little bit better, right? Listen to your talks, follow you on social media. Where can we find you?
I'm the easiest guy in the world to find. Go to byronreese.com, BYRONREESE.com, or search. That's my Twitter handle, and that's my everything. So search for that on Amazon. I luckily have been in this early enough that I was the first Byron Reese to grab all that stuff. So you can find me anywhere.
Very nice. So Outliers, you can go to outlierhq.com. That's outlierhq.com. First of all, subscribe to the podcast, rate, review it, share with your friends. But there you're going to find links to Byron's books, his social media accounts, his website. Obviously, he's the real deal. It's exciting to hear from him and the things that he has to say. Byron, we really appreciate the time that you spent with us, your words of wisdom, and we wish you nothing but success. And we're looking forward to following you in the future.
Thank you so much. And anytime you want me back, I'll be here. Thank you for having me.
I love it. In 100 years, for sure. Thanks. Outliers, we'll talk to you tomorrow.